Good
All
morning,
right, Dan.
everyone. Good morning, everyone. Dan Bates, President and CEO of Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and we are glad you could join us this morning for another version of Coffee and Conversations. We are really excited today because we're going to be hearing from Bryan Knicely, the Executive Director of Pyramid Hill, and he's going to be updating us on what's been happening at Pyramid Hill during his term, and also a little bit about the arts in general in Hamilton. So we'll get with Bryan in just a couple of minutes. You know who I am. We're going to find out who all of you are in just a second. Let me tell you how this works. If you haven't been on this before, we are on Zoom. You can ask questions of the presenter during the presentation. If you are on Facebook Live, we usually have a very large audience on Facebook Live. Type your questions in, and Tiffany will repeat them to Bryan, and he can get them answered for you. And then once this session is over, this will be on our YouTube channel for future viewing or for sharing it with others. So with all that being said, Laura, are you doing self-introductions?
Yes, I can do self-introductions. Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Merrill with the Greater Hamilton Chamber. Glad to have you with us today. We're going to go around. Please let me know your name and what company you're with. Meg, we will start with you.
Well, hello, I'm Meg Ortman. I'm actually starting a business in the local area. I'm going to be starting an Edward Jones branch. Been a passion of mine for quite some time, so I'm really excited to get, to serve the community.
Great. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thanks.
Ben, would you like to tell us who you are?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Ben Cornish with First Financial Bank.
Glad to have you with us. Kathy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Ellman with Spooky Nook Sports.
Glad to have you with us. Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Grubb, Director of Membership and Marketing at the Greater Hamilton Chamber.
All right. So, Bryan, it's all up to you. We will let you take it away.
Great. Well, I'm Bryan Knicely. Thank you, Dan and Tiffany and Laura for hosting this today. It's nice to be in Hamilton and give you some updates about Pyramid Hill, some things about some partnerships that are coming up, and then a little bit of conversation about economic impact of the arts nationally for the state, and then maybe some things we can talk about here locally. I've been here 15 months now, and it's been a whirlwind. We've gotten a lot accomplished in that amount of time. It's also Pyramid Hill's 25th anniversary this year. So we sat down as a board and actually thought about where we want to be in the next 5 years for our 30th anniversary. And part of that was coming up with a new long-range plan for the park and looking at ways of connecting better with our patrons, our members, the community at large, and then just how we present the park as a cultural feature of this entire region. So we had some really good outcome of those planning sessions, and I'll talk a little bit about those. One of them was really about our place here in this community and being the largest outdoor sculpture park in this region. For those of you who don't know, we're roughly 350 acres. That really grew from the time that Harry Wilkes had a piece of property that was about 40 acres in which he built his house, and then expanded to include sculptures. I'll actually pop up a picture here so you can see, for those of you that aren't aware. So anyway, he built his house here, and the park is named after the house, Pyramid Hill, and it's really our biggest asset, our biggest cultural asset and art piece here. And that's why the board really wanted to focus on the Pyramid House, because it's sort of been the biggest unknown to a lot of our patrons, especially local people wanting to get in the house and see where Harry lived and the namesake of the park. So one of the things we have coming up, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, is how to re-engage the house. That was the big primary outcome of the board retreat, in addition to how we work with members in our community and so forth. But I first want to talk a little bit about the number one thing we have going on right now, and that's the Journey Borealis Light Show. Annually, every year, Harry started the light show many years ago. It has grown over the years and now includes over 1 million lights. It's about 2.5 miles long. So if you haven't been out to experience, I know Meg just mentioned she was out here already. So we have one convert already in the group, and we hope many more will come out. The light show is really important, I think, for the community as a whole, to give them something to look forward to every year. We always have lots of people that come in and mention that they come every year, whether it's with their family, their kids, their grandkids, and make it a holiday tradition. one of the things we want to do as we move forward is to make sure that we're changing it every year and making sure that it's re-engaging. I hope that people will notice that we've started that process and we're doing less sort of in your face secular pieces of the light show and doing more artistic interpretations. We hired 3 new artists this year to do just that. So they're reimagining the light show. We hope to do that every year going forward. It runs until January 1st, so you have plenty of time to come out. We're open Tuesday through Sunday. We did something different this year where we closed the light show on Mondays and made it open to our sponsors. So if you were an event sponsor this year, you got to pick a Monday night to come out and do a walk the lights with your invited guests, whether that's your company or that we actually had a private individual do a walk just last night, actually for an artist group. So we thought that would give people another way to interact with the lights this year. Like I said, it's open until January 1st. It's open on Tuesdays through Thursdays from 6 to 9 p.m. and 6 to 10 p.m. Fridays and to Sundays. So come out. It's $25 per carload. If you're not a member, it's $15 a carload if you are members. And if you're members at the reciprocal level and above, you get 1 free admission. That's actually a picture of Swan Lake from last year. Swan Lake, I think, is much prettier this year. So if you have any questions about that, you can always call us. Check out the schedule. If you come out on Tuesdays, it's free for Hamilton residents. That's been a standing tradition for several years now. You just have to show a driver's license or utility bill to come in free on Tuesdays. So spread the word, come out. And I should have mentioned at the very beginning too, if you have any questions, let me know throughout the conversation, because I'm happy to answer questions as we go through this. Go back to the conversation about the Pyramid House. When the board met, we realized, that the Pyramid House was our #1 asset, and trying to figure out how to re-engage that. And the art committee came up with the best plan. And for those of you who have been here and have gone down and enjoyed the Ancient Sculpture Museum, which we have in the park, even though that's been around for many years, that's probably our most underutilized asset in space. But people will come to the park, they'll rent an art cart, they'll go through. The museum is probably the most overlooked because people want to be outside, and so they haven't been going there. So since I've been here, I moved my office to the house, and I realized every day how many people try to get in the front door of the house, and the people that managed to skip over the museum. So the art committee has decided we're going to move a part of the Ancient Sculpture Museum collection to the Pyramid House. Harry Wilkes actually purchased many of the sculptures to decorate his house when he was alive and living here. And so we wanted to sort of recreate what that might have looked like in an exhibition sort of standpoint. So it'll, one, engage the house. It'll allow us to open the house and give tours to the public, but also make sure that people do see the artifacts that we've had in this collection for, the last 20 plus years. They've been in Harry's collection for that long and longer, some of them. But anyway, just another way to re-engage the community with Pyramid Hill and making sure that those sculptures come front and center. So we're really looking forward to that. That will probably open on Founders Day, which is March 11th. That's actually Harry Wilkes' birthday. So we're sort of doing that in honor and tribute to him and everything he's done here. So for those of you that don't know the history about Pyramid Hill, going back 25 years, when I mentioned he had about 40 acres, he built a house, he had tennis courts here, he had a mini golf course. At one point, he thought he would actually sell off some pieces of land to his friends and have his own little, art colony out here on the hill, per se. And he decided after that, he really didn't want to do that because he had people that were wanting to exhibit artwork here, outdoor sculptures, and he realized that was really the passion, and he wanted to be open to the public. So over the course of his time being out here, the 25 years, the park grew, like I said, from 40 acres to now it's 350 acres. We have 75 permanent monumental sculptures in the park. Many of those have been purchased. Some of them are on loan. We try to bring in a visiting artist every year, just so we can expand that artist reputation in the community or even across the country, but also give artists or the community a chance to engage with another artist. We tend to do those with workshops. So when the artist is here doing the install, the community gets a chance to come out, especially working with children. So we always look forward to that. We also have in the Ancient Sculpture Museum, for those of you who haven't been there, hopefully you've been there, a rotating gallery space. We just closed 2 exhibitions in that space, and the third one for this year called Here and Now is going up, and that's our first national call to artists. And it's really meant to be an exhibition of what have artists done since the pandemic, or how has the pandemic had an impact on their artwork. And there are roughly 20 artists that were selected from across the country, and those works are coming in now. So that'll open later this month and run through the end of February. And we'd like you to come out because this is a contest also. So there will be a People's Choice Award that is awarded at the end of February. So when you come out, make sure you vote on what your favorite piece is. We hope to do more of those interactive exhibitions going forward, because I think that's important for not only engagement, but also just awareness and getting a broader pool of artists into this region. I think the furthest piece coming in this year is from Idaho, I believe. So it really is a large pool of people coming in. Another exhibition we have coming up in the spring is an artist, Jill Krudik, and she is doing a piece called Coral Beliefs. And it's really about the coral reefs and their connection of creativity, and really having an educational opportunity to describe the reefs through an artistic perspective, to talk about their endangered habitats and their importance to the environment. So Jill has actually created a one continuous piece that will wrap around the entire wall. It's narrow, but it goes from wall to wall in sort of a rainbow effect of the coral reefs and the explanation of what the coral reefs and their importance here. So I'm really looking forward to that, because that was something she created site specific for us, and it'll be a debut of that work. So that'll open in March and run through the summer. We also have an exhibition up currently about Fortified Hill, and I'll talk a little bit about Fortified Hill too. The exhibition has some pieces on loan from the Cincinnati Historical Society, and we have a few pieces from our own historical society here in Hamilton to talk about Fortified Hill, what it was about. We have a 3D topographical map, so you can get an idea of what it looks like from a landmass that's out there. If you go out there today, it doesn't look like that, because of course trees have grown up. Honeysuckle, our favorite local greenery, is there. But Fortified Hill, for those of you that don't know, is a native ceremonial site. It's not a burial site. And it was purchased about 2 years ago and given to Pyramid Hill as an educational opportunity to present it as Fortified Hill. We know some things about Fortified Hill. There are a lot of things we don't know about Fortified Hill. In fact, I'll go back here and bring up this drawing. So this is what Fortified Hill looks like from a map standpoint. When you go over there, first of all, I'll go back. It's about 2,000 years old. We don't know the exact time frame. We know it was built during the time of the Hopewell culture, or the early woods people. We don't know a lot about what they used it for. We anticipate that it was most likely ceremonial. Again, no burial site here. When you enter Fortified Hill, Pyramid Hill is sort of in this region. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving around. So you enter Fortified Hill, and this is how most of the people that would have visited here would have entered. There are these series of arcs that come in, which is an opening gate. Now, unfortunately, because this has been a field for many, many years, a lot of this is worn down, so you can't see most of that. There are some indications of the curves if you look really closely. The mound itself was built only 10 feet high at its highest point in the mound. So you have 10 feet of dirt over 2,000 years of erosion, and there's a visible mound left, but a lot of it's eroded down. So there were 4 entrances. This is one entrance here, this is an entrance here, this is an entrance, and this is an entrance. Again, we don't know what this is for, other than we know that this point right in the center is the highest point in Butler County. So the native people would have gone up there because they would have had a view of the Miami River, they would have a view across the entire region. We also suspect that this was part of a much larger series of mound works from here all the way to Newark, Ohio. In fact, at that time frame, they had a highway built between Newark and this region and beyond, so they could travel back and forth. We know that the dirt that they used to create the mound is not from here. So the dirt was all carried in. So you imagine, you know, our Fortified Hill, you look at Fort Ancient and all the other mounds between here and Newark, the dirt wasn't from there. It was all hand carried from somewhere else. And what would have been baskets about the size of a basketball. So you think about the time frame it takes to build something like this, you know, someone, you know, creates the space and it takes generations to build. Two nice things about Fortified Hill, this opening right here and this one right here had water features built into them. So there was a clay lining that was put in. So there was some ceremonial process when you would come through the gate that you would go through, and there was a water feature. Those are still there. So the clay has withstood the test of time, and we don't know what that was for. Unfortunately, many of these earthworks were misnamed. When the white people showed up, they assumed they were forts because there was a wall built, so therefore you're protecting something. The water features wouldn't have been on the inside. If anything, you would have put a moat on the outside. So that's why we know it's ceremonial. They have also found pieces of mica and other minerals that would have come into this region from as far away as Montana, from where now Crow Feet or the Crow Nation is, or Blackfeet Nation. Those are areas that would have had that. So people would have made a pilgrimage here at some point in their life and brought that with them as a means of paying homage. We know that it wasn't a transactional thing because they didn't find Ohio flint, for example, in the other direction. So Fortified Hill, it's got a lot of mysteries. We've worked a lot with the Miami Center and other former tribes of this region to try to identify what the purpose of it might have been. And we'll never know, unfortunately, because they were nomadic peoples. They moved around. They didn't leave an oral history, or if they did, it's died out over the generations. So that part, unfortunately, is gone. So we can only sort of work to understand what we can find out about it. We know it is part of the series of Fort Ancient. For those of you that aren't aware of the mounds in Ohio, Fort Ancient and 4 other mounds going up to the Serpent Mound in Newark are being submitted as a UNESCO site. And if it gets approved, it'll be the only UNESCO site in this entire region. So that'll be very important as far as getting us on that international radar for visitors to come in and check out these native sites all the way. Really from Newark, they would have gone down initially through Kentucky and in Indiana, but a lot of that was eroded away through farming. It was later peoples that actually came in, and just north of this mound up about here, there is one burial mound, which was, it dates much later, like around 1500 years ago. So other native peoples came through and used these properties later on for other purposes. Even across Ohio, if you look at the number of mounds or sites around, it's pretty staggering in number. There were, I want to say, over 500 burial mounds in Ohio alone. So this was a very popular place because of agriculture, the number of rivers coming through here, and then the connections to the Great Lakes and going east and west for, you know, hunting purposes at that time. So we're very excited. The Pyramid Hill will be opening Fortified Hill next year for tours. Members will be the first ones who get opportunities to get on those tours. We're really excited to, one, keep that clear so people can get out there. We're actually going to build a sort of a platform so you can get up higher and look down and actually see this mound formation here and the water feature that it has within it. So stay tuned for that. We'll get more information out there and get it out to the public as soon as possible. Does anybody have any questions so far? Don't be shy. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about, and this is sort of getting into the broader conversation of arts in the community, but I'll stop sharing here for a minute. The local arts and cultural organizations have banded together recently, and we've started an arts roundtable. And the purpose of that is really to look at how, as a community, we can come together and do something bigger, better, stronger, whatever that looks like for the arts, and really make a stronger presence here. We've had several meetings. We've had a guest speaker come down from Ohio Citizens for the Arts and really talk about how to engage our community in a broader sense. I'm really hoping that we can build that presence over time. I know we've talked about as a group doing an event for 2023, just one sort of to show you the massive numbers that we represent here in Hamilton, but also making sure that we make that connection to the economy and why it's important to have the arts here, quality of life, all those things that you sort of hear about, but you don't really know about. So, one of the things I did when I first got here was go over and talk to Spooky Nook because I was new, I know they were new, and figuring out how do we, combine forces here to make Hamilton a better destination. And one of the messages I have for this group is how are we all preparing for that to happen? I don't know that as a community, some of the organizations understand the impact of that and what that means for us. I actually scared my board last year when we did our budget. So if Spooky Nook had opened this year and had their 1 million visitors here, I showed her in our budget presentation, if we only got 3% of everyone that went to Spooky Nook to come to Pyramid Hill, we would double our annual population coming to Pyramid Hill. So one, are we ready as a community? Are we ready as a nonprofit? Are we ready just as a whole for this influx of people? And really to help them have a great experience while they're here. I think that's my number one goal, is making sure that we can benefit them so they want to come back. Being a cultural asset here, if they're coming in for a sports event, they may not have the time then, but if we can dangle something in front of them as a cultural community or as an arts community, they'll say, hey, do you remember when we were at Spooky Nook, we had that, event there? There was a great downtown, there was a great art park, there was a, this or that going on, and wanting to make sure that those folks take the opportunity to come back, on a weekend, come back for, a shop local Saturday kind of thing, because they saw shops here. So I think it's important for all of us and to continue that conversation from the cultural standpoint to make sure that we're making an impact downtown so those visitors do come back, because that will affect our bottom line. I don't know if Kathy, you want to mention anything about Spooky Nook, but we're very excited about you getting open. I know this year I put it back in my budget again, guesstimating you might have 500,000 people here. So that's my goal. My fingers are crossed.
Well, that's our fingers are crossed too. We're very excited to be part of this community who's been so gracious to us. I mean, I know you probably experienced the same thing. We're just excited to get going. I know probably everybody on this call has actually been in our building. I know, Dan, you've been in our building a few times, and it's all just very exciting. I just remember when it was dirt. Now it's going to be significant. So yes, from your lips to God's ears, we're going to have 500,000 visitors, maybe 1 million. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important for all of us to, one, embrace this. I mean, it's happening. I think, I've been fortunate enough to live in multiple places around the country. So when people were afraid about parking issues and all that, I don't see it. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think we have plenty of parking. We have plenty of restaurants. It may make us adapt when we go out and about and do things, knowing that, these are going to be high concentration weekends with people coming in. But I think it provides a huge opportunity for us as a nonprofit to actually engage with a new stream of patrons and really economic impact. Going back to, last year's budget, and if we had gotten 3% of the people here, that's potentially an additional $200,000 of income for our nonprofit alone. Now, if you multiply that out, who might go to the fitness center, who goes to a restaurant, all those other things really impact our bottom line in the community, which I think is really powerful. So we're looking forward to that. And here at Pyramid Hill, we want to be greater partners with all of you. So if you can think of a partnership idea, let me know. I'd be happy to discuss it, because we're all about re-engaging in the community. So we're looking forward to that.
Bryan, just to reiterate what you've already said, number one, the chamber is very supportive of the arts community coming together, as an economic engine for the city, and I think that's very possible. But I think also what's interesting is this is what we've been trying to tell businesses now for the last 4 or 5 years. With the people coming to Spooky Nook, you're not going to get 1,000 people in your store, but an additional 20 people a day or an additional 100 people a weekend or whatever. When we put together some numbers that I'd done for a presentation like 3 years ago, small businesses can easily double their revenue, with just a few numbers of people. It's I know when people think about 100,000 people are going to, they're not going to see them in one location, but they don't need to.
Right.
You know, any business that gets an additional 100 people over the weekend, and if half of them spend money, that's a huge, huge impact.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's why it's important to point out, we presented that budget based on 3%. I mean, that's a very small number. In fact, for next year's budget, we lowered that to 2% because we didn't know when they would actually, if it was going to be a full year and all that. But it really will make a big difference. You don't need all 500,000 people coming through your front doors. In fact, you can't physically do that. So, I think it's important for all of us to be ready. I think it's important for us to make sure everyone has a great experience. There might be I think our biggest challenge would be getting our local folks to understand this is a good thing. It's a good thing for all of us because it'll create a better search of all downtown businesses, all the nonprofits here. So I'm looking forward to it. And then I want to quickly switch over and give you some statistics on the creative economy and go back and just share my screen here. And really talk about the economic impact of what the arts and cultural sector does. I've worked a long time with the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, and they partner with Americans for the Arts, and they get their data every year. These numbers are based on 2020, but just so you understand the cultural impact of the creative sector, it's $876.7 billion of the US GDP. I don't think that people understand how big the cultural non-sector is. If you add in all nonprofits, of course, it grows much larger. I mean, we're just under the retail trade sector of the GDP, and we're above transportation, warehousing, and even other outdoor recreation. I know we hear lots about rails and trails and bike paths and all those. We're more than double that. So when you think about quality of life in a community and why people move in, you have to have all this. You have to have outdoor recreation, you have to have the arts and culture, you have to have retail. And I think this really sort of highlights that importance and where we are in that sector. I'm going to scroll down here. Just in the creative workforce alone, 4.6 million people work in the arts and cultural sector in 2020. I know that dropped. I want to say because of COVID, the cultural sector, I think, lost 11% of its workforce during the pandemic. I know Ohio, I looked up the number, and I believe it dropped to 9% in Ohio. But if you look at the creative workforce as a whole, it's 3.1% of all jobs in the country. We paid about $446 billion in wages in 2020. I think that's, important to show how they're out there. And I think even looking at individual artists, knowing that they're part of the workforce, but you may not see them because they're working in a studio, they're working from their home. They don't necessarily have a storefront out there, but it is a big industry. The creative sector, especially artists, are 3.6 times more likely to be self-employed because they are working from home. And 63% of artists have a bachelor's degree or higher. I think that's important to know because there was a comment, in fact, I think it's on here, yeah. Creativity was the #1 skill set that was projected needed in 2022. And I think as we come out of this pandemic and, even with the economic recession, if we have one, or if we're hinting about one, it takes creativity to bring businesses, organizations, cities, towns, you name it, back out into the economic powerhouse that it should be. So I think, they were probably right about creativity being the #1 skill set needed. I don't know that they knew how important it would be based on what had just happened. I'll show you some information about Ohio too, just to bring it home a little bit more. Again, the $21 billion to our Ohio economic impact through our economy here in Ohio alone. The deck shuffles a little bit in Ohio. Construction's a high above us, transportation. We bring in more to our state budget, even utilities. I think that's important to know. Within Ohio, 152,000 jobs. I mean, that's a pretty big industry as far as Ohio goes. So I think it's really important to show the importance of what it does, not only for a community, those who are working within the community, but the return on investment. So I think Hamilton's very fortunate to have made that sort of declaration that it is the city of sculpture and how important the arts are here. I think there's a different vibe here than many places. I mean, if I go back, I grew up in Southeast Ohio, and it was much like Hamilton, 20, 30, 40 years ago, where there were industries. The industries left town. Hamilton grabbed onto something new and has really made a surge forward. My hometown hasn't. In fact, my hometown is decaying rapidly. So I think, whoever was here at that time and putting the right people in place and using, businesses, the arts, culture, social services, whatever that was, the mix is here and it's making Hamilton thrive even more. So that's very exciting. Adding Spooky Nook into that mix has been, incredible for even help pushing that forward and taking something that was in decay, more or less, and an eyesore in the city to make that really one of the central, parts of not only the community, but also economically. It's interesting here. I see just in my quick interaction, sort of the tug and pull of Main Street versus High Street. I laugh because I've lived in other places where there's been some dividing thing in town that, people say, oh, I'm on this or that side. I see it as one. I think as more people come into town, they will see it as one too, because they weren't here, 30 years ago when there was a bigger divide. I really am excited about, how Hamilton has come together. I think the bridge really should be a uniter, not a divider. I think we could do more things to highlight that. I'm glad there's a crosswalk now, so you can actually walk across the bridge. When I was here for my job interview, I was on the bridge and I got caught out there. I'm like, where do I go? But I figured I just dodged the cars and ran across the street. So I figured it out, and I think other people will too. And I think it's, Hamilton's really staying ahead of that curve and figuring those things out as we, go forward and more visitors come to town. So I want to open it back up to questions again.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What are the requirements to apply for a UNESCO site? I think that's pretty big to have one in Ohio.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. And I have never gone through the process. I do know that they spent about 3 years compiling the information, because you have to provide all the historical data. You have to do LiDAR testing of the dirt. There are a whole bunch of scientific things that have to happen. You have to get the community support, and that whatever mound is included in that will be protected, that the community is making that part of their resources to make sure that nothing can be damaged there. And then for these mounds, they had to go back and talk to several native tribes to get their permission to actually name them as what they are. I know the gentleman who was on the writing team, he spent the better part of a year and a half writing the application, which I want to say was about 1,200 pages. It's a big deal. It goes then to the UNESCO board, and we won't find out the determination until 2024, I believe it is. It goes through this rigorous process. They have to come out, they have to visit all the sites, they have to do their own research, and then they will sort of bless it, and then they'll make the announcement. So it's going to be a while before we can find that out, but it is a huge deal. If you've ever been to one of those sites, I mean, it's not just a quick process where you send in and get a little seal or indication to put on your website saying we did it.
Yes, thank you.
Brian, I have a question, and this is one you can't answer right now, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When you look at Ohio economy and the GDP, nationally and all that kind of, I wonder if there aren't numbers that we could pull to see what percentage Hamilton's economy is of Ohio's economy, which I'm sure is a very, very small percentage. However, when you apply, of 1/10 of 1% to the numbers you're talking about, it's significant. So I'm wondering, some of those meetings we talked about, how could we, put together some numbers? I'm wondering if we couldn't make some assumptions based upon, how Hamilton's stands with the state of Ohio, and make some assumptions applying that to these numbers for the art community, so that we could have a more powerful message to the business community, just how many jobs and how much income is generated and how many wages are generated and all that kind of stuff, in Hamilton and the local area.
Yeah, and the answer is we can. In fact, Americans for the Arts has an economic engine calculator. It takes some research to do that, because it takes looking at the cultural sector, what their revenue is every year, their expenses, the number of employees they have, their payroll, all those things go into this economic calculator. And then they look at other communities like you, so they can understand when you have, say a show at the fitness center, when people come in, how many of those stay at a hotel, how many of them eat out at a restaurant? They have those indices that are out there, and they can make a calculation based on, say it's Lima, Ohio is the same size as we are, and they will look at what's happening there because they've done a cultural study. They can overlay that information here. So they're actually sort of comparing apples to apples. They wouldn't compare us to Cincinnati, for example, or to a Columbus, but they would look at other cities like us that have similar outputs and assets, and then look at the numbers coming in, and they can generate those numbers. It takes about 9 months to do that research, but it is possible. And I think it would be a big number in Hamilton.
I'm wondering how, we could make that happen, and could the chamber assist with that in any way?
I mean, it's relatively easy. I think that Americans with the Arts, it costs roughly, I think the last time I did it, I was in Yellowstone. We were a participant. I think it cost us $10,000 to go through the process of getting that data, but it was well worth it, because then it was important to show the outcome and how that, those predictors helped us define other areas in the community.
Might be a good ask to the city.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Other questions? Don't be shy.
I have a question. Do you know yet how many of the ancient pieces you're going to be moving into the house?
Yeah, right now we have it set up that there are about 2/3 of the pieces that are coming to the house. We weren't moving them all. We actually have a couple that need to go out for repairs. And there is some redundancy in pieces too, so we wanted to show the best of the pieces we had. I mean, even how Harry bought them, I can almost, if I look at the pieces, I can tell the sequence in which he purchased them, because he bought most of them at either Sotheby's or Christie's in New York. So you can see if he had a particular, say it's a sculptural piece, and then there's a better one, of course, they know he's a potential buyer, so they dangle the new thing in front of him saying, hey, we know you have this, but here's a better one. So we don't need to have all the pieces out. We also want to make sure that the house itself with the pieces here can still be functional as a rental space. So that way we can have business meetings here or small group receptions and that sort of thing still going on with the pieces in the room.
Are they going to be in like the main room, or?
Yeah, they'll be in the main room in the hallways, just because we want to make sure it's in the public area.
Okay.
Brian, Wanda has jumped on. She asked a question. Do you have community service opportunities? She is with a halfway house in the area and always looking for things for the clients to do.
Absolutely. We love volunteers. We love doing community service and partnerships. So yeah, just have them reach out to either myself or to Sarah Templeton Wilson here, and we'll get them set up.
All right. Any other questions for Brian? No. All right. So we're going to be back with coffee and conversation in January. So our first date in January is January 10th. So there'll be 9 to 10 a.m. back here on Zoom, Facebook Live. Brian, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Some incredible information. Pyramid Hill is such a gem in the community that a lot of people maybe haven't visited. So I'm going to challenge everyone to go out and visit during the day. I've got an annual pass. We've been out a few times this year already. It is just such a beautiful property, and all the outdoor sculptures are amazing. So everyone, please go out, take a visit, and see what you're missing at Pyramid Hill. Any last comments?
I just want to thank Brian for being on with us today. And if you haven't spent some time in Pyramid Hill, shame on you. You need to do that immediately, and not just for the light show. The light show is a treat, but it in no way really showcases, what Pyramid Hill is all about. So in spite of my recent mishap, it's still one of my favorite places in the city of Hamilton. So I would advise probably not riding your Harley Fat Boy up to on the hill at Abracadabra. So
in the grass,
but it was somewhat worth it after all. So
yes, do not do what Dan does sometimes.
Yes.
But we got some amazing photos, so that all worked out. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being on. Wanda, I will connect you with Brian and Sarah. Anybody else needs anything, let us know. We will be back on January 10th. Thank you all and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.